I don't know. As much as people bash on Isekai as a genre for ruining anime in recent years, it's pretty old. The idea of going to another world with the power to shape it as we see fit isn't new in terms of storytelling. And even anime itself has dabbled with the trope since the 80s with Aura Battler Dunbine. Or hell, what do you think Inuyasha was? People love the crap out of that series. But when we talk about isekais, we're not talking about these older shows, but the more current trend. Typically, some high school otaku goes to another world, is given some power by or a god to do well there, and basically becomes the focal point of the entire world by setting up a modern society in that fantasy setting, or what have you. And these early ones weren't what most would consider bad. There were some redeeming aspects to them, or otherwise they wouldn't have a market in the first place. What starts the decline of a genre? Where does the market become oversaturated? When does the cream stop rising to the top and the whole batch is soured? I'm running out of metaphors and rhetorical questions, so join me as I, someone who couldn't give less of a shit about this, embarks on a journey to figure out this whole isekai thing. I'm gonna go through, look at the forefathers of this modern boon, and try to find some common threads. Soon. I guess, welcome to what I'm tentatively calling a retrospective on isekai as a genre. Looking at the older ones and trying to piece together why the hell every other damn show released these days is an isekai. Told in parts. Starring KonoSuba this time. I'll workshop the title. So KonoSuba, or because people get a kick out of me saying the whole series title in Japanese and English, Konosubarashi Sekai ni Shukufuku o, or God's blessing on this wonderful world, began its life as a web novel. And get used to that. Published from 2012 to 2013. It's since been readapted as a printed light novel. And if you're wondering what that looks like, imagine the 50 Shades treatment, but done competently. The current printed light novel is still ongoing at the time of this video's release, but we're not concerned with that right now, are we? With 2 seasons of the anime out, KonoSuba dropped onto the awaiting anime fandom like a bird shit from a flyby in winter 2016. Now I know what you're thinking. Dumbass YouTuber starting a video series on a parody isekai. But 2 things. First, I have to ease myself into this, lest I drive myself crazy. And second, parodies highlight the negatives in a way to lambast them through farce. My meager YouTuber brain's too full of anime tits and ass to genuinely analyze such a nuanced genre as isekai without my hand being held. Or, and this is a stretch, I'm looking at a popular show first because it was the top of a Google search result. So modern isekai stories all have the same general setup. The protagonist dies and is taken to another world. At this point, he's given something unique or special to help him acclimate to the change in scenery. I guess what makes this particular series stand out among its contemporaries is rather than taking some super-powered smartphone or amazingly broken ability, he decides to take the god giving him the offer. Which seems like rather than taking a jug of milk, he took the whole damn cow. Until it turns out she's completely useless. It's a sort of ingenious twist where the main character demonstrates some incredible planning skills, subverts the established trope, and it's all in character as he's doing it out of spite against the god for mocking him. That sort of writing does make this stand out in a genre, as well as a successful parody for completely backfiring on the main character. Part of what makes this show an obvious parody is how blatant it is about addressing the otaku nature of the main character in these type of settings. It's often taken for granted by the show and the medium that the nerd knows how these worlds work. But here it's questioned. How does such a person lacking social skills and only knows about games interact so easily with random people with completely different life experiences than his own? Why are these people so often suddenly reliable compared to their old lives? Are they just choosing to be losers or what? There's also this whole anti-harem thing where the main cast kind of absolutely hates one another. In pretty much every other anime, a guy would turn red and reflect how lucky he is to have a hot girl clinging on him, even if she's covered in toad slime. But this dude's flat out sick of her shit. Whereas other isekais introduce these sort of characters as eye candy for the audience, and romantic tensions for the protagonist. Here it's more that they know each other well enough to realize how they absolutely couldn't stand one another in a relationship. While adding some charm to the dynamic, it helps define the cast as more three-dimensional than just some wobbling tits to ogle. The stereotypical setting for an isekai is that of your bog-standard fantasy game, with mages, priests, knights, and dragons. Throw in a demon lord for good measure if you're feeling frisky. This show seems to laugh at that concept by taking the usual tropes of that setting and the almost obligatory video game parallels to point out the absurdity. Like, why is there always adventuring guilds, monsters, and quests? Well, because it's low-paying work, with mostly dead monsters, and these people are practically slave labor doing the odd jobs at the town. That leads to subversion, but I feel it doesn't really get to the meat of the issue of why these exist. It's more for a critique purpose, and the sheer absurdity of a cabbage invasion is pretty damn humorous. I feel like there's an untapped market of these sort of worlds not living up to our expectations. And you kinda get that here with the big badass wizard being all talk and no stamina, the crusader being a hopeless pervert who can't hit a damn thing with her sword, and the literal healing goddess being more focused on party tricks than spells. In essence, why the hell do they all follow this fantasy formula? It's hard to tell if this ecchi is just parody or not, since that seems to be Japan's idea of humor in the first place. But regardless, it's pretty prevalent in this series too, as in every other isekai. But I think it's done better here because it's not the show's single joke it beats furiously like a teenager home alone for the first time. And by how this series highlights these aspects, it sort of defines by contrast isekai as a whole. As much as the protagonist bitches about his daily life of building walls, carrying around his worthless mage, and sleeping in stables with horse shit, not being like his dreams of living an adventure-filled life in another world, it puts into focus the whole appeal of this genre. It's meant to be that sort of wish fulfillment.
This just in other news, the sky is still blue.
Yeah, that's an obvious conclusion. No shit, the series is about a wish fulfillment power fantasy of being the chosen hero in a world unlike our own. But that's true for so many different anime out there not of the isekai breed. Why does this particular formula resonate with so many? Well, probably because of who the protagonist typically is. Let's look at the other isekai guy in this series. The one given a cursed sword and treated as an actual hero who fits the standard formula. He was sent there with a special weapon, made a name for himself with his broken abilities, and has a group of girls following and obsessed with him. That's the direct parallel this series shows to contrast itself against. Many protagonists of isekais are high school-aged or young adult men with average lifestyles, listlessly drifting through their hobbies and jobs or school. They share that same escapist desire for video games and anime, which is mainly who's watching these shows. It taps into that demographic of middle-class boys and men who are living in bored contentment, looking to unleash their untapped potential. It's not just a power fantasy or wish fulfillment. It's escapism in its purest form, where the character is vaguely defined by generalities of good, so the viewer can easily map themselves onto him. And that's still pretty damn obvious, but the answer isn't always complex. So what's the impact of this particular isekai? Not just the genre, but culture itself. Well, this show was well received. Massively praised as a light novel and generally considered a successful adaptation. I feel the comedy influence is propagating through the genre, with a slew of quote-unquote parody isekais floundering around the seasonal lists these days. At least, many seem to take themselves less seriously, as the protagonists have developed a sense that they're in an isekai. Many now constantly enter monologue about how surprised they are about being awesome, or how they act calm on the surface but are a nervous wreck underneath. Tensura, Mao-sama Retry, and Okasan Online demonstrate that trend of comedy and self-aware becoming more of a mainstay, showing that this series was widely successful with its genuine attempts at humor, certainly pushing a lot more comedy isekais out the door. Not that this was the first comedy isekai. but it's definitely been the most successful in recent memory. I feel this is a good place to start when examining isekais, as it tends to emphasize what people dislike about them for laughs. KonoSuba brings this whole "why is isekai popular" question into focus. But I'm not satisfied with that, because knowing why it's popular still doesn't answer the other questions. Like, why is it spreading the way it is? Or why does it fail to evolve in meaningful ways? There's so many different isekais out there, and more produced each season, that figuring out how this market isn't completely tapped, or why other shonen anime don't fill that same niche, is interesting to me.
Hey, you made it to the end of the video! Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and do all that other YouTube stuff, because that really helps me out. And I'd like to give a special thanks to Phil Corona for making this video possible. Thanks for watching.